Am I audible? Hey, good morning, Lakshmi. Others, am I audible to you? Okay. Yeah, let's just give a minute for others to join, and then we'll get started. So meantime, will we wait any questions or doubts from the last class? Thank you. Okay, if there's no questions, then so just to recap, what we saw yesterday was, as part of your CI process, what we are going to do is a quality analysis in which you will be doing code coverage and static code analysis, and you take these results and you will be publishing to Sonarqube as a dashboard. So that's where when a user wants to see what is the status and what is the threshold percentage that you have given and what is the percentage of code coverage and code analysis, using that you will be able to decide what is the quality of the product and what needs to be improved, or if you need more test cases to be written so that all the code will be covered. Okay, so that's what we were trying to see. Now, in addition to that, okay, so let's say now let's talk about a pipeline once again. So what happened was, if you go back to this, so our process for CI, our nightly build process, what did we do is, so you run the build based on a new check-in, or you try to trigger the build on a scheduled basis, and then what will it do? It will compile unit test, package, code coverage, and then static code analysis, and then get the results. Now, if everything is fine, what is the next step that we have to do? So we have to typically hand over this code which has been converted as a package, which is jar or var, to the QA or further to the customer for deployment. So that's where what we need now is a artifact which can be deployed. So that is nothing but the jar or a var that you have generated using your package. And in Maven, we know that the folder called target, inside which you will be having your jar or var generated. Now that is what, if you want to give it to QA or if you want to give it to stage or production deployments. Now, how will people access it? The reason behind that is the machine in which you want to deploy and do some testing or production will be different. And the machine in which you have built this is different. And not everyone will be having access, which is one problem. And the second problem is what happens after some time when you do a new build, then the existing file will be either deleted or overwritten. So what if you want to get back the same file after some time? You will not be able to take. So that is where what we have to do is similar to how we do versioning of our source code into a version controlling system like Git or GitLab. The binaries, whatever that we are generating, that is your jar or var. So we also need to track so that for every build, whatever the corresponding artifact that you're going to generate, which is a jar or a var, has to be stored separately. And on need basis, you should be able to access that and not in the same machine, but into a different location. So that's where in the industry, we have a separate tool called binary or binary repository manager. Okay, so Git or GitLab is called as source code repository manager. Now, when you have a binary files like a jar or a var, if you want to maintain, then you're going to have a separate tool, which is what we call it as binary repository manager. Okay. Now, can anyone tell which is the binary repository manager you guys are using? Is anyone aware of that? Or where do you guys store all the code? No, SVN is for your source code. I'm asking, especially someone said you are going to take care of builds or you're already part of DevOps. So where do you store your binaries? Your source code is in SVN or Git, but I'm asking binary, the jar, var file, tar file, whatever you generate as an output of your build, which is what QA or customers is going to consume, right? So where do you store that? No. So if anyone is from QA, how do you do deploy? From where do you get the files? Because like what we are doing in your company also, you will be doing so many builds. Where will you store all the output of the builds? Okay. So you don't use any tool like JFrog Artifactory or Nexus. You mean to say you store the tar or the jar var in Subversion directly? Okay, you deploy. Okay, no problem. So now what happens as a standard practice now, if you see, storing it in Git or any other Subversion or other folder like sit server will not be a good practice because you can't have a proper control. So that is where now in the market, there are some tools to manage binary storage. Okay. So the reason why I was asking is it was told to use Nexus, but that is what I wanted to know. Is Nexus something you guys are using, or is Nexus something which you plan to use? That's the reason I wanted to know, because there are a lot of other similar tools like Nexus or better than that. So just wanted to exactly understand what is that you guys have planned. So any idea on Are you guys already using Nexus, or it is just that you're going to explore it now? Okay, so anyway, so now if you understand, once you do the build, you need to make sure that all the binaries should be stored into a different tool in which I can easily find out, okay, build 10, this is the output, build 11, this is the output, build 100, this is the output. So that way, build 500, this is the output. So I should be able to exactly get the artifacts for a particular build. And from that tool, we can give access on who should download, who should not download. Okay. So both the things can be done using binary repository managers. So what we have to do now is post your Maven package. We have to now take this, and as the second step, you're going to upload the artifacts, okay, to Nexus server. So basically Nexus is a storage for your binaries. That is your jar or var. So now for this, once again, the question comes up is, how do you set up a Nexus server? Okay. And then how will you use your Jenkins process, that is a build process, to upload your artifacts post this? Now, this is where, once again, if you say Nexus, right, it's also a big tool. Now you need a minimum of 4 GB RAM and at least some 10 GB hard disk in order for you to set up Nexus. Okay. And once again, there are a lot of configurations that you have to go through to set up Nexus. So instead of that, if you use a Docker image that already has the Nexus specific open source version, or you can take enterprise. Now, depending on the image that you can take and put the license. But now the point here is, if I take this image and if I create a container out of it, the container will automatically have everything that is needed as an environment to run Nexus. Plus, Nexus will also be available inside, and there will be automatically a startup command which will also start that. So all we have to do is create a container on a machine which has enough resources. And again, if you look at this command, so this is where, in order for us to create it as a container, we will run it in the detached mode, and Nexus will be running on port 8081, so that we will map. Okay, so this is what first we have to do. So quickly, let's take a machine and try to install Docker and try to bring up container for Nexus so that we don't have to install or configure Nexus automatically. By starting the container, you will get it. At least for your practice, this should be more than enough. Okay, so I believe you guys have a separate machine. Okay, now don't use the same machine, Nexus and Sonar in real time. But in case if you do not have a separate machine, what you can do is whatever the machine that you have already used for Sonar or Sonarqube, you can just stop that and you can use it for Nexus. Now what I'll do is I'll try to create a new machine for me. Okay, so in fact, I already have a machine created. If you see this machine, I'll show you once it is started. So this is where you can see I have a separate Sonarqube machine, and I have a separate Jenkins master, and I have a separate machine for Nexus. Okay. Okay, once this is up, let me connect to it. Okay, just to show you. So this machine, again, I have taken Ubuntu. Okay, and this has around 4 GB. Okay, and I have around total of 9 GB, and pretty much I still have around 6.5 GB available. Okay, and here I have to download. Okay, so what I'll do, okay, so I have all these things already available, but let me stop. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this machine, I'm going to install Docker, which I've already done. So that's where, if you just check, Docker is already installed. Okay, and in this machine, I have already downloaded the image also. If not, when you try to run the Docker, you will be able to get the image downloaded. So all we will do now is quickly, let's run this command so that we will get a container with Nexus in it. Okay. Okay, so Docker PS. So you should see that there is a container running on the background, exposing port 8081 to the machine. And let's look at the logs. And the name of the container is Nexus. So once again, Nexus is a web application. So, and again, it's a huge tool. So if you just give some time, you should be able to see Nexus is up and running on 8081. Okay. Now, once it is done, then what we have to do is we need to tell Jenkins to connect to this. Okay. Okay. So it says Nexus open source edition is what we are using, and it's connected. Okay. So to cross check, let's go back to this machine and we'll just take the public DNS of this. So there you go. So you have Nexus accessible. Okay. So now if you understand, it's very, very easy to set up an environment using Docker. So this is the reason Docker is very popular. Now, whether you use a third party image or you develop your own image, instead of we doing the manual configuration and manual deployment, you can actually use a Docker image, and from that, just by creating a container, your deployment is done. Okay, so this is how Docker is going to replace our traditional deployments, wherein instead of we downloading the artifacts to a machine, making sure all the packages, whatever is needed for that application to run is set up, and then start the application, we can put everything together as an image, and then just by creating a container, you should be able to get everything inside it in no matter of time. Okay. Now to log into Nexus, the default username is admin. Okay, but the password, you should be able to get it from this file. Now again, where is this file available? Where is the file available? Can anyone tell me? Where is Nexus running?
Container.
Okay, so Nexus is running inside container. So anything inside container has its own file system. So that way, This file is also available inside the container in which Nexus is running. Okay, so that way, now we will use the Docker exe. Now this is why we saw the container management first. Okay, and that we are using now. So I can just say Docker exe and the name of the container, and then the same command here. So now inside the container, it will try to take, and this is the password. Okay, so it's asking us to set a new password. We'll do this. Okay, so right now we don't have any specific access. So just go ahead and say enable anonymous access. Okay, agree. Fine. So this is what you have to do first to quickly create a container, and from that we will set up Nexus. Okay, now once this is done, what we have to do is we want Jenkins to access this. So that's where Jenkins still doesn't know anything about Nexus, but for this you need to install a plugin. So quickly, let's go back and let's connect to Jenkins. Okay, so now I have to install a plugin for Nexus, because if you remember in the Jenkins, unless and until you don't install any plugin, Jenkins will not have an option. So first we need to install plugin. So go to manage Jenkins, manage plugins. Now under this, you should go to available in case if you don't have anything installed. Now I have already installed it, so that's the reason I will be going into install tab just to show you, but you should go to available tab, and here search for a plugin with the name Nexus Artifact Uploader. Okay, so go to available, and in this search for Nexus Artifact Uploader. Okay, and this is the plugin what you should get. So go ahead and choose this, download and restart Jenkins. Okay, so post that, we will try to see how we can tell Jenkins on where is our Nexus, and from the job, when you try to do the build, Jenkins should be able to upload it automatically to the repo. Okay, so before we configure that, so can you quickly go ahead and do these two things? Create container for Nexus. I'll just share you. Okay, and once it is done, try to install this Jenkins plugin. Can you try this now? Have you guys tried it? Okay, have you guys tried? All right. So yeah, so once you have Nexus and the Jenkins plugin installed, so what we can do now is, if you go back to your job, right? So let's go back to our pipeline job. Okay, so when you come to the build section, what we earlier had was Sonar Scanner. For a minute, I'll just remove it because I don't have that server up and running. But what is that we have to do now is, so over here, once again, in the build step, you should see a new option called Nexus Artifact Uploader. Okay. So you should go to add build step and choose this option called Nexus Artifact Uploader. Okay. Now, once you add this, it is going to ask you some options. So you can give what is the version of Nexus. So we are using Nexus 3. And then what is the protocol that you want to use? Just use HTTP. And this is where you have to give what is the URL of your Nexus. Now, in that, you need to give without the HTTP. Okay, because it's going to pick up the HTTP. So just give only the name and the IP address. So which is nothing but here, if I come, I can take this with 8081. Okay. And just give only this. Now, make sure you remove this. All right. So this is the URL where we are telling to connect to Nexus 3. Now, in this, we are going to give a credentials. Okay. So in the same way, what you have to do is you can add a username and password. So go ahead and click on add Jenkins. And this time you're going to give a username and password. So choose on username and password, and the username will be admin, which is the default, and the password that we just changed. Okay. So I have changed my password. So I'm going to give that. And once you have given the password, just go ahead and add. Okay. Now, once you have added, you will be getting that here. Okay, so that you can just choose. All right. Now, this is what the basic thing we have to do. Now, whenever you talk about Maven, right, we always upload or we access the artifacts using three combination of values, which we call it as GAV, which stands for group ID, version ID, and the artifact ID. So that way, we are going to tell what is that details to the Jenkins, so that while it is uploading to Nexus, it will be uploading with respect to the same GAV. Okay. So now for this, I'll just give the group ID as Bezvatech, or basically you are going to give your project name here. And then the version, I'll keep it as latest. And this is where, what is the repository? So we haven't created any repository in Nexus to upload. So for that, you have to create a repo. So let me just go back to Nexus. So here, click on this gearbox. And on the left-hand side, you should be getting a repository option. So click on repository. Now over here, once you click on this repository, so we need to create a new repository. Okay. So now click on this new or create repository. Now, once you click on that create repository, so Nexus has various types of repositories that you can use. Now, since we are trying to upload a jar or a var, what we will do is we will create the type of the repo as, that is Maven. Okay, Maven hosted. Okay, so I'll choose this because this will hold all the types of Java based artifacts. So we will create this. Okay, and it is asking for a name. So I'll give the name as Bezvatech. All right. Now, come down. So here, what types of artifacts that you want? So once again, if you go to Maven, so we know that we can do a snapshot builds, or we can actually do an actual build, which is what we are going to use for release. So I don't want to give any specifics. So I'll give mix it. So it will be having both the types of artifacts that I can upload. Okay. And on the layout, leave it as strict, so that we want to make sure that we follow a proper GAV. Okay. And then come down. On the storage type, leave it as default. Okay. So you don't have to change anything else. Now, I don't want any validation to be done, so I'll just remove. And here, when you have a repo in Nexus, is it needed that sometime you want to overwrite an existing file? So in case if you want to do, then you can go ahead and say disable, or you can just go ahead and allow, so that sometimes if you're trying to rebuild, the same artifact will be uploaded. But if you want to have a track or a version for everything separately, then you can always say disable or allow based on your need. Okay. So post all the configurations that is done, just scroll down and go ahead and create. Okay. So what we have created is a repo in Nexus for our sample project, and that is Bezvatech. And here you can see it is of a type Maven. So that means you can store all Java based artifacts in it. So this is the name what you're going to give here. So come down to your Jenkins and give the name of that project. Okay. And then finally, what is the artifact that you want to copy, right? And that's where you have to tell when Jenkins runs this job, you have a workspace under remote root directory. So what is that file that you want to add? So give that information here. Okay. So now for that, what you can do is give once again an artifact ID. So I'm going to keep everything the same for me. And what is the type? So basically, you are going to tell what is the extension of the file that you are uploading, which is a jar or a var or a zip. Since we are uploading it to a Maven repository, it has to be a Java based. So here I'll just keep it as jar. Okay. Now, what is the file that you want to upload? So that's where we need to give the location with respect to our relative path of our workspace. So if you go here, this job. So last time when we did a build, so the output was going into sample jar, target, and inside the target, there was a particular jar, or the same way you have a separate folder called sample bar. If you go inside it, you will be having the target folder, right? Now, let's take that. Okay, so let's take any of the output. So if you come down, you can see inside the workspace, it's going to be sample jar, target, and this folder name, right? So assume this is what I want to upload. So I'll take this and we'll give it. Okay, so what we are telling now, once the build step is completed, in fact, if you have added the Sonar scanner and the Sonarqube analysis and code coverage. So what we are going to do, once the build is success, we are going to execute and collect the quality details. And once that is fine, then we are going to upload the artifact into Nexus repository, which can be consumed later by QA or production for a testing or for a release. Okay, for that, what is the repo in which you want to upload? So what file that you want to upload, that is what you're giving the details. Okay. And once you give, now let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the build. Okay, so we don't have the machine running. So what we will do, let me quickly start the build machine. So I've started only this. Remember yesterday we had set the Sonar machine, or the machine in which we have the Sonarqube running as a build machine, right? So let me go ahead and start that machine. Network is too slow. Okay, so this was the machine. So let me just start it. So let it come up. So in meantime, if you go back to Jenkins, so the basics that we understood, if you are giving a group of machine, and if none of the machine is available, Jenkins will be waiting. So that's where you can see, since in the group what we have given, there was only one machine and that also is not available. So Jenkins is on waiting or pending. So whenever this machine comes up, Jenkins will start running. Okay, so we'll just wait for some more time. Okay, so this machine is up and running. So let's go ahead and launch the machine again. Okay, so it's connected now. So if you go back to the job, let's go back to the job. Okay, so you can see just now it ran this once the machine was available. And if you look at the console output, so once the build has been completed, okay, the Maven package has been completed. So we will have the artifact generated and code coverage generated. In case if you had the code analysis after this, it will complete. And then the next step, what we are trying to do is upload it to artifact, which is the Nexus repository. So here you can see it's exactly going to this location of Nexus. And in this, under the project called Visvatech or the repository called Visvatech, so it's trying to upload. And when it is uploading, it uploads in the GAV. So GAV is nothing but the group ID and then the artifact ID and then the name of the file that you're uploading. Okay. And now it's in fact giving us the location, which is nothing but what you should be able to see it here under this repository. Okay, I'm just refreshing. Now this repo will have all these files. So this is where what we can actually do is for every build that we are doing, whether it is a nightly build or a CI build, depending on your need, you're going to upload it separately into a Nexus repository, for which you need to have Nexus running on a separate machine. Okay, so this is how now you're just going to upload the same thing again and again. But if needed, for every file that you're uploading, in fact, you can also put a different name so that when it is uploaded, you will be able to differentiate which output is from which build. For example, here, if you see, both of them is going to have the same name, right? So instead of that, what you can do, you can try to write some script which will generate the file with a different name so that when you upload, you can upload it something like Visvatech build 6 And for the previous one, you can upload it as Visvatech build 5. So that way, for every build, you can give a unique number, and that is what later on for QA or for production, you're going to download and deploy. Okay. So can you quickly try this? So create a repository under repository tab, repository, create a new repository, and in that, create the repository as the type called Maven 2. Okay. And then go to your job, and from the job, you just add a new step called as upload artifacts for Nexus. Okay. But in order to get this, you need to make sure first you have the Nexus plugin or Nexus uploader plugin installed, and then you will be able to get. Okay. Can you quickly try it?
Has it, everyone tried it? Okay, so if you have tried it, right, now let's move on to the next topic. So what we have seen so far is, when you try to use a Jenkins job, let's say for a build like a CI build or a nightly build or a full build, so you're just going to do a series of actions. But what happens as we go through complex stages that we have to perform or complex activities? So it's not always possible that you use the freestyle job, because if you want to customize the flow, now in the Jenkins default or the freestyle job, when you try to run, the first thing that it will always do is clone, right? And then it will go ahead and do other activities. But what if you have a requirement where you want to do something else before you do the clone? That is, if you want to change the workflow and you choose what is that you want to do. And how about reusing the same for different projects? Then every time for a new project, you have to create a new job and do the same configurations or copy the configurations. So that's when using freestyle job is not scalable. Okay, so when I say scalable, you cannot use it for multiple jobs, and if you have to set up, then it is going to be a time consuming process. And second thing is, using the Jenkins freestyle, what will happen? Now, we will not be able to customize our workflow on what you want to do first and what you want to do next. Okay, so that's when using freestyle is one way of executing automation through Jenkins. However, there is another concept in Jenkins, which is what we call it as Jenkins pipeline. Okay, so to understand this, what do you mean by a pipeline? So a pipeline is nothing but a series of tasks which you are going to do one after the other, wherein you have to achieve end result by connecting various tasks put together. For example, if you talk about CI pipeline, so you have to do a checkout, and then you have to do a build, and then you have to do a package generation, code coverage, code analysis, and then uploading to Artifactory, and later on, if you are going to generate some image or deploy, so everything, whatever that you're going to do a task in series is what we call it as pipeline. So for modern workflows, when we have a series of tasks which we have to do, if you want to have more of a customizable way of telling what to run, how to run, and not in a rigid way like how we are using the freestyle job, then Jenkins gives us a pipeline plugin. Okay, so in fact, it is a plugin using which you can now define whatever that you want to run as a code. Okay, so this is where whatever that we did so far, we were trying to configure it using the freestyle job. So instead of that, in Jenkins, we have a concept called Jenkins pipeline. And what we are going to do in this is we are going to give whatever we want to run as an automation through a declarative code. So declarative code means you are going to tell what and all has to be run in a code. So when I say code, we will understand a little deeper what is that you have to learn. So it's a basic of some syntax using which we will be able to tell the same activity, whatever we want to run in a file format or in a code format. So that way, using this code, you can customize Jenkins and you can define the workflow on what it has to do first and what it has to do second, and after that, what it has to do. So you can completely configure your own way. And since it is a code, you can typically store it into your version controlling system like Subversion or Git, and you can reuse it for different projects. So that's where for modern workflows, we are not going to use your traditional Jenkins freestyle job. Instead, we are going to use the Jenkins pipeline, for which now we need to understand what are the syntax of the pipeline, how is it going to run, and all those whatever that we have seen on a freestyle job, how you were configuring using UI. Instead of UI, you are going to write some code and we are going to define it. Okay, so that's where with what we have learned so far, what we will do now, we will understand what is this Jenkins pipeline, what is the syntax, and how it is going to be used. Now, to get it a little more deeper, so when I say the code, so Jenkins uses what we call it as a DSL. DSL stands for domain specific language. So this is based on Ruby. Okay. So when the first version of Jenkins pipeline came, what we had was a type called as scripted pipeline, wherein we need to know and give the syntax completely in Groovy. Now, this was very difficult for regular users because you have to learn a new language and then you need to write it. But on the latest version of the pipeline, what we have done or what Jenkins have done is they have simplified the syntax. So instead of using the Groovy directly, you are going to use a declarative syntax. So what do you mean by declarative? So internally, it is going to use a domain-specific language which is developed on top of Groovy, which is much more simpler. So you don't need to know Groovy for that. So there are some basic syntax you need to know. So once you know that, with this, we will be able to define the code which tells what exactly I want to run, where I want to run, how I want to run. But when you are developing a pipeline to do a CI/CD or any other process, you can use declarative, or you can use scripted, or you can use a combination of both. So what we will do is, we will try to take the declarative pipeline and we will see what is the simpler syntax. In that, there are some examples where I'll show you how to use a scripted pipeline also inside a declarative pipeline. So that whatever we were able to do so far in a freestyle, we should be able to do the same thing in a code, wherein we will create a file called as Jenkins file. Okay. So a Jenkins file is a configuration file which will be having your declarative code or a scripted code, and that is what Jenkins is going to read. So instead of you configuring in the freestyle job, in the Jenkins pipeline, you will tell Jenkins to read from a file called Jenkins file, and inside that the code will be there. So that's where what we are going to learn now is what is the syntax, how are you going to specify what to run, how to run, and when to run. And similar to whatever we did in freestyle, there are a lot of additional options that you will have in this Jenkins pipeline. Okay, so that's what we are going to learn. So any question before we jump in deeper on what is a pipeline or a Jenkins pipeline, and what is the difference between a pipeline and a freestyle job? Okay, so if there's no doubts, let's do one thing. Take a break for 10 minutes, okay? And we'll regroup after that. And then I'll start showing you what is the syntax, how do we run, and we'll get hands-on on Jenkins pipeline. And then we will take some example on how to achieve the same. Okay? Sure, take a break. I'll talk to you guys in 10 minutes. Is everyone back? Is everyone back? Hey, am I audible to everyone? All right. So, as I was telling, and I'm back. Instead of using the freestyle job, we can now use a Jenkins pipeline, wherein it is nothing but a file in which you are going to give the syntax in a code so that you can define it declaratively on what you want to run, where you want to run, and how you want to run. Okay. Out of that, we will be using a declarative pipeline. Now, what we need to understand is scripted way is a hard way to do, wherein you need to know complete Groovy based syntax. But instead of that, on the latest version, we have declarative pipeline, which is where we are going to use Groovy based DSL. That means a domain specific language on top of Groovy. Okay. So to understand this, what we will have to first know is when you say a pipeline, and especially when I talk about a Jenkins pipeline, you're going to write some content in the file, which is what I was telling you. But in this, we have to follow some syntax. Okay. So what is the syntax? So anytime if you look at a code, everything will be blocks, and you will have a lot of parent blocks and child blocks. So in that way, in a Jenkins file or a pipeline, you are always going to begin your file with a block called pipeline, and you're going to end with the flower bracket. So this is where all the code that you're going to tell on what your pipeline should be doing, which is nothing but the series of steps it has to perform in the pipeline block. Okay, so remember the syntax will always start from pipeline. Now within that, we are going to have various other blocks. Okay, now when you're defining a pipeline, within a pipeline, each set of activity that you want to perform on a particular machine is what we call it as a stage. In fact, we have to start considering it like this. Instead of having several jobs put together to achieve one workflow, you can use one Jenkins file, which is equivalent of multiple freestyle jobs. So in that way, What is that a job will do? You have to run it at some time and it will go to some machine and it will perform some task. So like that, instead of having multiple jobs put together in some series with downstream dependencies, you can use a pipeline to define what and all it has to do one by one. And for that, each job that you are trying to give, the equivalent of that is what we call it as a stage in pipeline. Okay. So for example, if you wanted to set up a pipeline of 2 jobs, the equivalent of that in pipeline is you are going to have 2 stages, wherein each stage represents a job that you were trying to run. So in that way, the pipeline will be further used as stages. Okay. Now you're going to have a block called stages block, and as the name says, stages define what are the different stages that it is going to run in sequence. Okay. So at any time, by default, Jenkins pipeline will be running all the stages inside it in sequence, that is one by one. And when you are defining, for every stage, you are going to have a separate block. So you're going to say stage and name for it, okay, and then close it. So this is where every stage will be having a separate block, and inside that you're going to tell what to run, how to run. Okay, so you're going to have multiple stage. For example, I can say stage 1 or compilation stage or build stage, unit stage. That's how you're going to tell. You can define what is the stage going to do within this block. Okay. So this is a syntax where you define pipeline, and inside the pipeline stages, and in the stages, what are the individual stages that you're going to have. Okay. Now, a stage is equivalent to a job. So in a stage or a job, you need to tell what it has to do, correct? And that we will be giving it using a block called as steps. In fact, if you are going back to your freestyle job, you were adding a build step, right? So we added a build step to run Maven package, and then we added a build step to upload Nexus. We added another build step to do a code analysis and upload to Sonarqube. So that way, steps is nothing but what are the actual tasks that you want to perform. So once again, this is going to be a separate block, okay, inside your stage. So that's where for every stage, what are the steps you are going to perform? You are going to give it. Okay. Now, pipeline is divided into stages. Stage is divided into stage. And for every stage, you are going to give what is the step to perform. Okay. Now, over this, when I say job, you need to tell what to run, which is what the steps will tell. But the next thing you're going to tell is where to run. So that's when for every stage, you're also going to have one more block called as agent block, which will tell this particular stage should run on a machine that you give. This could be a single machine or a group or a label that we were giving. Same way over here. So this is how for every stage, what is that you're going to run and where is that you're going to run, you're going to specify. So agent block will tell the stage should run on this machine. However, what it has to run, it will be taking the steps block. Okay, so by default for all of them, you're going to be. But sometimes what will happen, there are few blocks that you will be giving within the stage so that it is specific to the stage. Okay. Now, if you give it within the stage, it is going to be local only to this stage. Okay. Now, if there are some blocks that you are giving on the top level of your pipeline that is outside the stages block, then we generally call them as global blocks. So whatever you define here, it will be the same thing applicable to all the stages. So any kind of block that we see going forward, if you give it within a stage, it is local. If you give it outside the stages on the top level of the pipeline, then it is what we call it as the global block. For example, if I want to give a machine and it is the same machine which I want the Jenkins to use for stage 1 and stage 2, then over here, instead of giving the block in this, you're going to give an agent block at the top level. So like this, there are a lot of other blocks that we will give. Generally, we call it as directives, not blocks, but Jenkins directives. Now, it all depends on where you are giving this block. On a top level, then this becomes global for all the stages. If not, anything that you give within the stage will be local only to this stage. Okay. So this is the basic syntax. Okay, very high level. Now let's start looking into what are the different options we have and how do you give this. Okay, but just remember pipeline, stages, stage, and then steps. And in that, what is the machine that it is going to use for performing each stage separately or in a global way. Okay, so this is the basics. Now let's try to take a couple of examples and see how the syntax changes and how exactly you are going to keep that. Okay. Now, for this, let's take the first example, okay, of agent. Now, there are different values that you can give to agent. So what we will do, let us first take an agent where I will make it global. Okay. So what I'm going to do in this example now, so if you look at this pipeline, so I'm defining one stage called stage 1, and what it is going to do, it's just going to print some message. So for now, just to understand the pipeline, we will take this. Okay, and then here for every stage, I told you that you can give a machine, but if you do not give, guys, can you go on mute, please? Now, give the agent block at the top level, then what happens? Whatever the value that you give here, don't mind. So now, whatever that I give in this on the top level will be the same machine that it is going to use for all the stages. Okay. Now, the example here, the value for the agent block, I'm giving it as any. So any means in the Jenkins, any machine which is available currently, Jenkins will go ahead and pick it up. And that is what it is going to use for all the stages. So as of now, there is only one stage. So it will try to take the same. Okay. Now, in fact, what I can also do, I can put two stages. Okay. So what will happen? Now, for both stage 1 and stage 2, what will the Jenkins pipeline do? It will use the same machine. And what machine it will use? Any machine which is available. So as of now, we have only two machines. So it will randomly pick up any one of the machines on its availability. Okay. So let's try to run this and see how the pipeline looks. And to run the pipeline, like I told you, you can create a file called Jenkins file and store the content and ask Jenkins to read. That is one way. But for any testing or any development that we are doing like now, instead of the Jenkins file, you can directly give the content and ask Jenkins to run. To do that, go back to your Jenkins, create a new job, and here just say sample. Now, instead of freestyle, choose the pipeline. Okay, and click OK. So you should be able to see now that there are no default options in the freestyle. So directly go to pipeline, and over here, if you want, you can copy paste the content here directly, or if you click on this, it will show you pipeline from SCM. So in this option, it will give you what is the file in which you have stored the same content and from which repo you want to take. For example, if I say Git, then it will give you the same details. So which Git repository you want to connect, in which the Jenkins file is available, what credentials to use, and it will try to read from this file. But for now, since we are developing, let me just go back to normal method. So you are just going to directly copy paste and ask Jenkins to run on this. Okay, so let's apply. And here, let me just do a build now. So it says something wrong. Duplicate stage in stage 1. Okay. I forgot to do this. Okay, it's running. Now, if you wait for some time, you can see that in a pipeline, it also displays the content in a proper graphical way. So every job is equivalent to a stage, and here you can see what and all it has done, where it has done. You will be getting the information. So stage wise, you will be getting the output. But if you want to exactly know where did it run, then you go to the console output. And in the console output, you can see, since you have given as any machine, so there are two machines available in the Jenkins. One is the master and is the node. So it is just picking up randomly this machine. Okay, and then it goes to the remote root directory. And this is where you can see for both the stages, it has used the same machine. Okay, now just to show you, I'll change the configuration here. I will tell no job can run on this unless and until if the job has a tag which is mapping this or a label matching this. Because since we have given use as much as possible, now what I'll do, restrict it to only those jobs which has label. So if you have a job in that, if you are using this label called demo, only then Jenkins can reach this machine. So in that way, if I go back and let's run this now. You should see this time the next machine available is master. So it has taken master, and you can see where lib Jenkins becomes the remote root directory. So this is where it's the same machine that it is going to use for all the stages. Okay. This is first example where we are just trying to understand how you define a machine and how the same machine gets picked up for all the stages. But what if you want to change? So that's where we will see what are the different options. So in this example, what we will do, okay. Now, instead of giving any, when you are using the agent block, in fact, you can also tell a label from which it has to pick up, which is nothing but a group. So to do that, you're going to say agent and then label and the name of the group or label. So let me make it as demo. So now what happens? When I run, it will be picking up the machine called build machine 1, which is available under this group or label. So when you say any, it can randomly pick up any machine. If not, if you want to pick up a specific label, then it should take this. So let's try this also. The same example, I'll just change from any to label and we will apply. And now if I run, once again, we have defined the machine globally. So whatever the machine it picks up, it is the same machine that it will be using to run both the stages. That's it. It picks up build machine 1 from the demo group and it's going to the remote root directory. And both stage 1 and stage 2, you can see it's using the same machine. Okay. But how do we know that it can pick up a different machine? That's where now what we will do, the same example, I will change it. So instead of giving global, what we will do, for each stage, I will give different machines. Okay, so watch this. So in this example, if you now see, for every stage, I have given an agent block within it. In that, I'm trying to tell for the first stage, take a group called demo. So that will take build machine 1. Whereas here, when I say agent any, the only machine available is the master. So it will run on master. So stage 1 will run on build machine 1 and stage 2 will run on master. However, when you are trying to give a stage specific machine, you should always make agent as none in the top level, because this indicates you are not using a global machine, you are going to use a machine specific to a stage. Okay, so this is what we will try to run now and see the difference. So I'm just updating the code. Let's complete it, 5. And now if you see, the first stage is running on build machine 1 and the second stage is running on the master or the Jenkins. This is because in the syntax we have told agent is none on the top level. That means global machines I don't want to give. So within each stage I want to give machines. So that's where it's picking up build machine 1 and for second stage it is picking up the master machine or the Jenkins master. Okay. This is how when you define a stage, you can tell a machine should be local or global and what machine to pick up. I'll share this example. So can you quickly try it now? Just try this example and let me know. Hey, has everyone tried it? Hello? Okay, I'm really sorry, guys. I'm not getting any update from anyone. I don't want to call up names, so I'm going to consider you guys have completed it, and I'm just going to move forward. Okay, but please do let me know if there's any questions or doubts. Okay, let me just talk about another syntax. So when we are using the Jenkins job, we always know that the Jenkins will pick up a machine, and in that machine, where does it run all the command? So it will be running it under what we call it as remote root directory, right? But sometimes what will happen, you want Jenkins to run the job on a different folder. Then in the freestyle job, there is no option that you can give. Whereas in pipeline, what we can actually do is you can use a custom workspace and tell Jenkins on where it needs to run. For example, here, let's go back to the same stage. Now, I'm going to run the machine specific to each stage. So here, what we are going to do, now I'm going to tell the machine is picked up from a group, as well as it is going to run on a different machine for the second stage. But when we are running, what you can do is instead of running the steps for the stage on the build machine 1 under temp Jenkins, you can tell a different folder that you want using a keyword called as custom workspace. Okay, and for this, instead of giving agent, you can see now inside agent I have given one more block called node, and that is where I have given the label as well as custom workspace. So if you do not have a custom workspace, directly you can give using agent, but when you want to give a custom workspace other than the default remote root directory, then you can define where it has to run. Okay, now for example, I'll ask this to run under temp Jenkins directly. Okay, so if you look at this output, you can see stage 1, when it picks up build machine 1, it is taking temp Jenkins workspace, and inside that the name of the job. Whereas now what I'm going to tell is I have a custom workspace where I'm going to run it directly under temp Jenkins. So instead of using temp Jenkins workspace sample pipeline folder, it will directly run under this. Okay, so let's try to run. Let me go back to this. So I'm going to apply, and let's begin. So I'll keep this open for some time. So if you check this, okay, so even though it has taken the default remote root directory, but since you have given a custom workspace, you can see whatever the steps that you have given to run, the Jenkins pipeline runs it under temp Jenkins. Okay, so this is where you can change the folder and you can tell Jenkins where exactly to run. So try this once quickly. Have you tried it? Okay. Now let me take another block to explain. What we have seen now is agent block, wherein how we can define that for a particular stage or for the entire pipeline, what is that machine that you want Jenkins to take? Okay, so which is one example. Now, sometimes what will happen for you to run a job, there might be some environment variable which you need to set. Okay, so at that time, if you want to set an environment variable, once again, there is a block called as environment block. Now, in the environment block, you can give a name of the environment variable and whatever the value. Okay. However, what will happen is it again depends on where is that you have defined the variable block. So in this example, if you see, I have defined a variable block at the top level. So for all the stages that I'm going to use, the same variable will be passed. Okay. So just to understand it, what I'll do, I'll just once again use a global machine and I'm having two stages. And in this, I'll try to run a specific command where I want to get the environment variable name. Okay. Now, in fact, for those who are using Windows, now instead of executing shell on a machine, you want to execute a Windows bash command, right? So the equivalent of that is you give a bat here. So when I say bat, it indicates that you are telling Jenkins pipeline to create a bash command prompt and run whatever that you want. So in that, go ahead and give percentage, the variable name percentage, and it will be retrieving the value. Now, since I'm using Linux box, so I want to create a shell, which is a Linux shell. So I will say use sh, and instead of percentage, I will be saying dollar. So that's how you retrieve the variable. However, another way of reading a variable from an environment in the pipeline is you can directly say env dot the name of the variable. So when I run this, it will run on the same machine. However, for both the stages, you should get the same value of the environment variable because you have defined it on the top level, which is the global definition you have given outside the stage. So all the stages will have the same value. Okay, so watch this. So let me run it. And let me build it. Okay, so you can see we have given a machine on the top. So it's a global machine for both the stages, stage 1 and stage 2. However, the environment variable is also defined globally. So both the stages, you have the same value of the variable retrieved. Okay, this is where you're going to define a variable using an environment block. Now, in this, what if you want to give a variable or an environment variable specific to stage? Then you're going to give the same block inside the stage. To understand that, let me take another example. And what we will do now here is so the same example, small change what I'm doing. I'm creating a global variable called var, and the value of that is global. And for each stage, if you see, for the stage 1, I'm again creating one more environment block And in this, the same variable, however, the value, what I'm saying is local. Okay. And now when I try to retrieve the value of this variable, it will always refer to local because you have defined. Okay. Now, this is what you're going to do for Windows, but for Linux, I will just change this and here the variable. Okay. Now, when you run stage 1, what will be the value of var local? But when you go to stage 2, you are again retrieving the same variable's value, but this time there is nothing local, so it will always take the global one. So stage 1 should print local and stage 2 should print global. Okay, so let's try this. So you can see now the global workspace, but however, look at the value. For stage 1, it's saying local, but for stage 2, it's saying global. So that way, whether it's an agent or it's an environment block, you can specify globally or locally. The same output is what you will be getting in this stage. You see, stage 1 gives local. So whatever the steps you are going to run, it's going to show you. Same way for the stage 2, it's going to give you global. Okay. So I'll give both examples. Can you quickly try now and see, in addition to how you can give a node, how do we define environment variable globally and locally and see the difference how pipeline is getting executed. Let me put this example in the chat. Please try and let me know if it's working or not working. Hey, has everyone tried? Okay. Has everyone tried it? Okay, I'm really sorry to say, but I really don't get any response. So let me ask individually. Ashwini, have you done it? Ashwini, am I audible? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Ashwini, are you able to do this? Any?
Yes, Adam.
Okay. Balaji?
Yes, I can do that. Madam.
Dhanalakshmi?
Yes, Adam.
Jagan? Jagan, are you there? Okay, I don't hear from Jagan. Hari, have you completed? Any questions? Okay, Kajal? Okay, Kajal, Kodai? Surbhi? Shraddha? Punita, Preeti, Neeraj. Okay, Deepya, what will this taking time? I would appreciate if you can at least show me or tell me so that we can fix the problem. Because see, try to understand, unless if I don't get any reply or feedback, I don't even know whether I'm audible to you guys, or is there a technical issue, whether you are doing it, right? So that's where at least I'm trying to understand. If you tell me at least you have completed, that should be good. Or if you tell me there's a problem, then I can try to fix it. But without any interaction, then it's just going to be like a regular online class. Okay, so if you want that to happen from tomorrow, I want you to come back to me tomorrow, because this will be very difficult because your management expectation is quite different. Okay, so I don't see any participation. I don't want to say any, but if you are really doing it, unless and until you don't come back and tell me, it will not be possible for me. So what we will do is you guys discuss, and before I take the session tomorrow, I want you guys to tell me whether you want to continue in this way, where I give a topic, explain, demonstrate it, and I give a time so that you can practice. If not, I can just go ahead and explaining and demonstrating everything. And without waiting, you can go back later, post the session, and then you can practice and come back if you have any questions or doubts. Okay. So if you can tell me, then it will be more appropriate for me also to help you understand the subject. Okay. So I do need this request. So please go back, discuss among yourself or with your lead, and come back and let us know whether you want to have sessions including labs hands-on, or you just want to see everything once, understand, and you will practice it later. Okay, I appreciate that. But yeah, Divya, can you show me what is the problem, what is taking time, or which step is not completed?
Yes, it is showing almost complete status since long time, but it's not showing whether it is successful or failure. So I tried one or two builds and it got success, but after that it's not success. It's still saying almost complete. I'm manually aborting this, but
Can you share your screen?
yeah. Yeah, it's showing almost complete like that.
Okay, can you please show me the pipeline stage what is given? Yeah, contents of it. Come down. Once again, demo, global, local, SH. Okay, can you open another tab and show me the console output? Okay, now you can see I have given a group called demo. In your Jenkins, what is the machine and group you have?
Okay, I actually have three machines. In one machine I have Jenkins, and in other machine, I mean I didn't give that master and slave configuration. Is it because of that?
Can you go back to dashboard? How many machines you have? Come down. Okay, so you don't have any machines available. Okay, fine. So that is where, in the example I showed you, I have a group called demo, and in that there is a build machine one, which is what the first day we did. So in your case, you don't have any group called demo, and that's
Okay.
the reason what is happening. The pipeline is waiting for a machine to be available. That is what, can you go back to that console? You can see.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is waiting. So what you have to do is either change your example to pick a machine which is available, or you have to create a group. Okay. So you can see
Okay.
there is no label called demo. So in your case, just change the pipeline and go ahead and put any keyword. Come on. I'm coming. Yeah, here instead of giving label demo, remove that and put any there. Remove the label. So you don't have any group in your Jenkins, just make any. So it will pick up your master by default. Now go back to that pipeline, stop, and then execute again. Yeah, just click on this red. Here, yeah, the right corner. Now come down. Go back to the 9. Yeah. Okay, one second. Just go up. In the progress end, you see a square box, right, with X mark. Yeah, click on that, stop the pipeline. Just make sure it's stopped. Yeah, so you have aborted. So now run the pipeline again. So there you go. The problem was you had a group given as demo, which is what we had given, and there is no such group. Because of that, the Jenkins was waiting for a machine or executor to be available.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else had an issue, or others are fine? Okay, cool. So anyway, it's almost time. Let me stop it for today, and please do help me tomorrow. Let me know how you want to proceed. So based on that, we'll have a lot of other examples, because we still have to complete pipeline, and post that we have to see Docker images, and then we will go into Kubernetes. But it'll be better that we all sync up in the same way, and then how do you want to take it up? More practice, or more of sessions where I can show you and you can just see in practice later. Okay. Sure. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow, and let me know tomorrow. The first thing we will do is discuss again. All right. Yeah. So, 16 GB of RAM, yes, it should be sufficient, because when we go to Kubernetes, again, minimum of 4 GB is what we needed. Yeah, but you need to understand your laptop is going to be 6 GB, but when you create a VM, that should be having minimum of 4 to 6 GB. Only then you can run other things. Okay. Yep. All right. Thank you. Then I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good day. Yeah. Bye-bye.